Hey, everybody, welcome to the Rooted Deep podcast. I am here today with Cathy Hodnett. And as if you notice, Allison Hale is not with us today. And we're really bummed that Allie is not with us. But she is under a blackout in the Dominican Republic, and they announced it yesterday. So we tried this morning to get her on to do the recording, but there is just very little electricity and very little juice. So therefore, it was awful. So, so we could see her, and then we didn't see her, and then we could hear her, and then we couldn't hear her. So she is jumping off that podcast. So today I'm going to two women in their 50s get to talk about doing life in the 50s. So this could be fun. Because we're kind of walking through these decade conversations. So Cathy, we've done the 20s, the 30s, and the 40s. And now we're talking about what it looks like to be in the 50s. And you always heard the 50s, at least I did growing up. The 50s sounded like, ancient, like Moses, right? It was just like the 50s, suddenly it was like you fell off the edge of nowhere land. But now that I've landed in the 50s, it's not nearly as bad as everybody made it out to be. Okay. Yeah. So I think I'm going to enjoy this conversation today, but let's start by just telling people a little bit about you. I know that you and I became friends. You're a women's ministry director here at a church right outside of Chattanooga in a little town. And so you and I met. We've been to Guatemala together and had so much fun. And this is what I know. You and I we'll get in trouble together if we're together long enough. That's what I know. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself, Cathy, because you've got an exciting life.
So I am Cathy. I am on staff at Dallas Bay Church in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Have been for about 9 years. I am married to Derek for 37 years. We have 3 grown children. Caleb, Aaron, and Emily. And Caleb lives in California with his wife, Caitlin. He's an engineer there. Aaron is here in Chattanooga, and he is going to electrician school. And then Emily is here, and she is about to give me my first 2 grandbabies.
Yes.
So we're going to get to enter grandparenthood this year. So
yeah, twins, right?
Twins, absolutely, and a pink one and a blue one. So we're really excited about that.
So you're just getting the whole package right off the bat. You get a boy and you get a girl.
Yep.
Oh, so, fun and exciting.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when I was in my 40s, I was like, I'm not ready to be a grandparent. But now that I'm in my 50s, I am totally ready to be a grandparent. Yeah. Ready. Absolutely ready.
I know. Yeah. So that's really awesome. Well, I know that, as you've been a women's ministry director, are a women's ministry director there at Dallas Bay. But tell us just, you don't have to drag this out, but tell us just a little bit about how you came to Christ, how you came to know the Lord, because I think that's so important in our journey and in our story. I don't think we make it through decades without Jesus. You know what I mean?
Right. So my father is a pastor, so I'm a PK. But when I was probably 5 to 6, he was not called into the ministry at that point. And so he was working he wasn't pastoring. He was working for Youth for Christ. Yeah. And so he was on a lot of nights doing youth stuff. And my mom and I, she would put me to bed. We would pray. And I'll never forget at a young age coming to Christ, knowing that I needed Jesus. But I also know about 25 years old, after not being in a church that my father had pastored and being young married, I needed to make that commitment. Not that I was not saved early on, but as an adult, hey, this is who Jesus is, and I need salvation. Again, I totally believe I was saved as a child, but I do believe, I just remember the day of, in my adult years, realizing what Jesus had done for me.
Oh yeah, I think that ownership. You do things with only so much understanding as a child, and then there's a point in your life as you get older where you have real clarity on just what Jesus did for us. And I think at that moment there is this, if you want to word it a rededication, or if you want to word it just a recommitment to say, wait a minute, you know what, I'm really owning this in a personal way.
Right. And it was the first time, I was in different churches hearing do I believe this? Do I believe this? Do I
Right.
believe, it was, when your dad says it, you believe it, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
you know, but it was a cool,
Mm,
just a commitment, I would say, once again, of just, oh, this is totally, I am
yeah.
a this follower.
Oh,
So
that's good. That's so good. Well, as we talk about being in our 50s, I think that I don't know about you, but there's kind of that element of it sneaks up on you.
it
At least
totally,
for me, I was for years in a college ministry. And so in my mind, I was always 29.
yeah.
You know what I
Oh,
mean?
I still am. I still
Etern-
am.
Eternally 29.
Problem.
Yeah. And I'll never forget kind of stepping out of that college ministry and stepping into ministry and looking around and going, I'm not 29. It's like, and it's one of those things where the 50s, I've just, it's been a fun ride. It's just been going, 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 going. And the 50s just kind of crept up on me. I wasn't expecting it. Then all of a sudden somebody said, oh my gosh, Reba, you're turning 50. And I went, oh my word, I am.
Yes.
Right.
Listen, when I turned 50, so I work with a pretty young staff.
Yeah.
The day I turned 50, one of the ladies that I work with, Precious, she looked at me and said, wow, Cathy, you don't have as much time left as you've had. Well, happy birthday to me, right? But
Right.
it was kind of like, wait a minute, that is, unless God just lets me live long, long,
Oh,
I it made a
yeah.
little bit more impact on turning 50 because I was like, okay, what am I going to do with the rest of my time?
Yeah.
What
Absolutely.
matters, what doesn't matter, that kind of stuff. I didn't
Yeah.
appreciate that at the time.
Right. Right. Of course. Well, now I think I'm 55. I think you're 2 years older than me, right? So you're
I'm
57.
57. Yeah,
Okay. Okay.
yeah,
So we're just kind of right there in that zone.
yeah.
And I do remember I have a really good friend. His name is Rand, and he asked me one time. He said, "You know that verse that we're to number our days?" And he goes, "Have you ever done that?" And I'm like literally? And he's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "No." And he's like, well, let's do it. He pulls out his phone and calculator and he's like, okay, how old are you? So if you live to be 70, and he turns it around and he goes, that's how many days you have left. And then he said, let's just say you live to be 80. I think he saw the look on my face. And he's like, let's just say you live to be 80. And he puts that in the calculator and he turns it around. And I'll never forget that feeling of, oh my word,
Yeah,
that's not as long as I thought.
right.
Right?
Well,
Yeah.
when you look back over the last 50, well, for me, 57 years, it
Mhm.
has flown.
Right.
It really has
Yeah.
flown.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then it puts it in perspective,
It does. It does. So let me ask you this: and what is different from the 40s? So that's that decade you just left. What is really different, would you say, from the 40s to the 50s? Because I'm sure there are women right now that are in their 40s and they're watching or listening, and they're like, "Okay, what should I expect?" So what's different between the 40s and 50s?
I remember when I turned 40, I had a harder time turning 40 than I did 50. I
Me
don't
too.
know. I don't know what that was. Like, I think 30 still sounded young to me. 40 was getting mature, but 50,
Yeah.
uh, but that 40 was harder for me. So 50, um, what lots have changed. Technology and me. That's a huge one, but that's just me. That's not because I'm 50. It's just because,
Right.
you know, I do think in my 40s, I I was still finishing raising my children,
Okay.
and now they are raised and out, and
Yeah.
and so that has been different. Menopause is different.
Sure. Right. Right.
um, uh, it is much. The world around is so much more noisy,
Yeah.
but not because I'm 50, but it's just because it
Hmm.
is. And so, um, yeah, but I don't feel so different in, like,
Right.
I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. So let you, because you mentioned your kids, that kind of kids leaving the nest. That
Yeah.
40 to 50 transition is usually that time when kids are starting to leave the nest, and whether it's going off to college and not really coming home that much, or whether it's getting married or going out on their own. So was that difficult for you? Was kids leaving the nest, was that a tough transition for you, or was it one of those things that you were ready for?
So my oldest son, when he moved out, he was a real homebody. And so I'll never forget when he moved out, we moved him into his own apartment. He was moving here locally at the time.
Right.
I didn't think he'd end up in California.
Sure.
But when he moved out, I can remember my husband saying what I was thinking. We were in the kitchen after we moved him out, and he looked at me and he goes, "Do you think we taught him everything he needs to know?" And I'll never forget just busting out crying, like,
Yeah.
"No, I don't think we did. I don't. I need
Right.
more time."
Right. Yeah.
So he is married, and my daughter are married. They're both not they're not married, but they are
Yeah.
married. Got married during my 40s, and so that was yeah. It all crept up so fast.
Yeah.
Like I can't believe I have 2 married children and one that's gonna be married pretty soon. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that's huge. But I love empty nest. I
Okay.
do.
See, I think that's good. I think it's okay to say that, because I think so many women are like, I don't, can I say that? And I'm like, well, absolutely, because isn't that the way God created it to be, right?
Yes. I adore my daughter, but when she was getting married, she lived in Murfreesboro, so she moved back, right before the wedding and stuff, and it is clear there's a reason that they need to leave and not come back. 2
Especially
women
during the
yeah,
months before
yeah.
a wedding.
2 women in a household. Yeah, and she would agree. It's so funny, but now you just get I Derek and I adore each other, so we do have a great time, and so
Hmm.
empty nest is not bad.
Yeah. And, I think that's so important what you just said right there, because counseling women through the years, and I know you've done a lot of this as well, and we don't want to get down a rabbit trail here, but I just think it's important to be said. If you don't invest in your marriage, while your kids are growing up, then when they leave, you're kind of with a stranger.
Yeah,
You've grown apart,
yeah,
and I hear so many women telling me, like, we didn't realize how far apart we had grown as we were raising children. And so I think it's so important what you said, that, you are just, you're so okay just being with your man, and
yeah.
living life with your man. And that, I think that, did you do something intentionally there, or talk about that for a second?
I will say that when we decided to have kids, Derek and I sat down and we got married at 20.
Okay.
So like we were babies. We grew up together.
Yeah.
And I will say that we were young, but God was so gracious to us. And we didn't know about bills and all that kind of stuff,
Sure.
and so we just loved each other, right? And so it was
Right.
gonna but I'm thankful that we fought the good fight. We stuck it out. We didn't do the easy way because there were days, we were two selfish human beings coming together. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I'll never forget, we had taken Emily after their honeymoon and everything and moved some more stuff up to their apartment. They moved to Knoxville at the time. And we drove away from there, and Derek and I looked at each other and said, "I'm so glad that we invested time in us."
Mm-hmm.
We Before we ever had kids, we sat down and said, "We're having children. I'm not having children. We're having children." And so
Mm.
we partnered in that, and then we made sure that we set aside time for us and made sure our kids knew that our time was a priority. And so when we drove away that day, and he said, "I'm so glad that we invested in us because we had stuff to talk about,
Yeah.
and it was not just the kids."
Right.
So
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, I think that's just so good. I just think it's a good word for women, no matter what decade you're in right now, but
yeah,
especially if you're in that early 20s, just got married, 30s, got toddlers running all over the place, and young children,
right,
or you're in your 40s and you're getting rid of teenagers and college kids. No matter where you're at in that, I just think that's so important what you said. You've just got to invest in that marriage, because when they all move out, that's who you have left.
absolutely. And it's so
Mm,
worth it. Like it's sweet now. It's really
mm,
sweet. And
that's
so
good.
and there were days, let me just tell you, so for all those women that are listening that think, "Oh, well, no, when you put two selfish human beings together, you got to work
Right.
system." And
Yeah.
so we're thankful we did the fight.
Oh,
Stay
that's
with
so good.
Just stick with
Oh,
it.
Yeah, good. Well, let me ask you this. What is something that you were surprised by that kind of in your 50s? Now that you're in this stage in your 50s, is there anything, whether it be a positive or a negative, doesn't matter, but is there anything as you rolled into your 50s and you kind of been rolling through that surprised you about your 50s?
I uh, so I being 50, I don't feel 50.
Okay.
Like I don't know what I thought 50 would feel like.
Right, sure.
But I I the I don't like being I don't like to be feel like I'm 50.
Right,
Treated like I'm 50.
right, right. Would you like a senior coffee? Okay.
Right, right. I don't feel
No.
like I'm ready for the
Right,
seniors group, but I'm
right,
not ready for I don't want to be out all weekend.
right, right. Right.
I like home.
Oh,
Yeah,
exactly.
so I'm surprised that well, I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't feel 50. So when people act that I am 50, that is weird to me.
Mhm.
I
Yeah.
know that makes no sense.
No, no, no. I think there's a lot of truth to that because it is kind of, it's like you don't feel like you need to go to bed at 8:30.
No.
But at the same time, you also, I know recently, a friend of mine, we were in the Nashville area and she said, "Hey, you guys want to go out to eat downtown Nashville? It'll be fun." And we did. And I'll never forget walking around and I thought, oh my word, this is awful. Can we not find somewhere quieter?
And I gotta be in bed by 8.
I'm
Like,
like, and I'm like, what is wrong with me? Right. And we just laughed. It was like, okay, we're just, everybody, you looked around and everybody was young people screaming and hollering. And I was just like, okay, let's just find somewhere nice and quiet that we can actually hear each other talk. Right. And so it's just kind of a different, right? It's just a different way of thinking about the way of what you used to think
yes,
of differently.
yes.
Mhm.
I used to make fun of my parents for going to eat so early. Now
Right.
we
Yeah, you
we
go
go
either.
eat early so it is quiet and we can get home.
Right.
Not because I'm scared to drive in the dark or anything. I just
No, no. Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think, I think one of the things that really surprised me about my 50s was the fact that people treated me differently.
yeah.
Um, I don't know if it's like all of a sudden people are like, I don't, it was an odd kind of thing.
That's
Not a
exactly
negative
what
necessarily. Not always a negative because sometimes it was like, okay, now people are listening that weren't listening before,
true.
suddenly. But I think, it was just a little bit, people just looked at you a little differently now that you're in your 50s. I don't know. Have you experienced that
Oh,
too?
absolutely. That's exactly what I'm trying to say without
Yeah.
being able to be eloquent with my words. But yeah,
Yeah.
I don't feel older.
No. Yeah. No, 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 exactly. Yeah. Besides the train wreck that menopause can be, right?
Absolutely.
Outside
My
of
body
that, yeah.
tells me I'm older.
Right.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
joints tell me I'm
Yeah.
older. But
Right.
other than that, I don't
Yeah.
feel
You don't feel older in your mind,
right.
which is great. Great. Yeah.
And I
Okay,
also
so
do feel a little more settled in my life.
that's a good word.
Like, when you're in your 40s, you're on your way to that thing you're going to be doing. And I
Mhm.
feel a little bit more in my 50s. I'm more settled where I'm
Yeah.
at and enjoying the moments more.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's
Not
that's a good
rushing
word. I
my
like
life.
that word settled. Yeah. Yeah, because there's
Mhm.
just a rhythm
Yeah, yeah. Because
that
when you're raising the kids and that's those stages early on, you're rushing to get to that next point, even though you don't mean to.
yeah,
And then now you're just like, no, this is good.
yeah.
This is good.
This is a good rhythm. Yeah. So I do you have friends, and I'm sure you do, that are in decades ahead of you or behind you?
I do. I have both.
Okay. So how does that like how does those influences impact you? How does that shape the conversation with you as far as having friends that are maybe in their 30s or 40s or having friends in their 60s or 70s?
So I have always, I think, flocked maybe to older women.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's uh and so I've had a lot of ladies in my life that have taken me under their wing as well.
Mhm.
And so there's been such great wisdom passed on to me. I want to do the same.
That's
And
good.
then the ladies, my friends, I have dear friends, they're in their 40s and um we they keep me young too because they don't let me get into that crotchety self
Oh
like
yeah.
I'm not going to the gym. No, you are going to the gym, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's a good balance, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree with that. I think having those people that are younger than you, where you can, somebody once said, and I think there's power to this, everybody ought to have a Paul in their life,
Yeah.
somebody older that's guiding them forward. Everybody ought to have a Timothy, somebody
Right.
younger that's coming behind. And I think we need those influences, because I think if you don't, you just get tunnel vision about where you're at, not realizing that it's different in front of you and behind you.
Yes. And I want advice from somebody who's walked through it. And
Hmm.
so for those who have gone before me and have walked through things and used, I want their wisdom on how they handle things.
No, absolutely.
And then I want to be able to return that to those that are coming behind me as well.
Yeah,
You know,
I think that's fantastic. And I know both of us being involved in women's ministry, you've got women across, I mean, their 20s, their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and even women in their 80s that are impacted by ministry. And so it's important to hear the voices from all those places.
well, and I had mentioned to you, our women across the board for our church, I think the world would tell us that we don't need each other. If you're older, you don't want to hang out with the young and vice versa. That is not true. Our
Yeah,
younger women desperately want to hear from our older women and
yeah,
vice versa,
yeah.
to
And which
understand one another.
Yeah, which is just so powerful, I think. And it's Titus 2, right? I mean, it's
Yes,
exactly what Titus
absolutely.
2 says, and I think that's just, man, that's just so good. Well, let me ask you this. So I know we don't even want to talk about the 60s, right? But what are you looking forward to in the next stage of your life? I mean, are there things that you're anticipating in that next stage of your life, or not really?
Yeah, actually, I don't think that I am headed for retirement anytime soon because the
Right.
passion for what I do is still there. And I know that God will show me what that is. But I do think I look forward to, well, I am very much looking forward to being a grandmother
Yeah.
and pouring into I had a really godly grandparents and just
Mm,
that loved us so well. And, I mean, I can still hear their voices in my life.
yeah.
And so I'm looking forward to that in my 60s. I'm looking forward to traveling more,
Yeah.
um, maybe not being so rushed. Just again, I think just being more settled and enjoying the moments.
Yeah. I like that. I like that. Um, so what are you speaking of that, what are you enjoying right now? I mean, what are just some things that you're just really loving right now?
I am loving the fact. So you know this, but we spent 20 months building a house.
Yes, you did.
And so we just got in it. And
Yeah.
so even though that's a tangible thing, we are enjoying home. We lived in
Yeah.
a little tiny rental for 6 months and it was an adventure for sure. And so I know other people have stayed a lot longer, but
Yeah.
it was an adventure. So we're glad to be actually home. And
Yeah.
yeah.
That's really cool.
So- And
Yeah.
I'm enjoying I still love what I do. I
Mhm.
still love
Mm.
getting women in the word, encouraging women.
Yeah.
I love that. It is
Yeah.
what I love.
Yeah. Me too. Yeah. Me too. And I just don't, I'm like, Lord, as long as you give me strength to do
Yeah,
this and I keep my
yeah.
mind, I tell
Right,
my team all the time, I'm like, if I start to lose it, y'all grab me and pull me off somewhere and don't hand me a mic anymore.
right.
But right. Don't let me hurt Jesus or myself. But as long as God gives us strength to do it, and as long as I'm able, although I am intentionally handing the reins off on a lot of things, not because I'm not capable or physically able to do it, but just because I want the next generation to come
Ab-
behind me to be ready to do it. So it's kind of a fun thing for me to watch as I'm repositioning myself in a
Yeah,
different place than I was before. Still doing the same thing, still passionate about it, but just repositioning myself a little bit so that there's opportunities for them coming behind me.
agree.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
exciting.
because I'm having to look at those that are up and coming that will be taking my place.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. Oh, I know. Yeah, I know. That's a real thing. So I know there's women listening, and maybe who knows what decade they're in right now. Maybe they're in their 50s and they're struggling. Maybe in their 40s and they're thinking, "Oh my word, I'm going to turn 50." But what words of advice would you give to women who are watching, listening right now? What are some things, do you have any just words of wisdom you could just toss out and say, these are some things God's taught me in this place and in this time?
um, I will say this that to be able to know that God's plans for you, no matter how old you are still good, and there's
Mm.
still plenty yet to be had.
Ooh, that's good.
Like, I go back to, I can't think of the call letters right now, but the I would have despaired unless I believed I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the
Land of the
living. And
living.
we're still living,
Yeah.
and God's still good. And so there are good days to be
Mm.
had. There's God encounters to be had.
Mm.
He still has
That's good.
divine appointments for us. I don't care how old you get. And that if you're in a season of hard, that this too will pass, because you've lived long enough, you see the cycle of the mountain, then the valley, then the mountain, the valley. But what you do know is that God is always, always, always faithful. And
Yeah.
he has proven that over and over again. And so there's
Mm.
some rest in that, knowing, you
Yeah.
know what? He's got me through before, he'll get me through again, and he's still got incredible plans for me.
Oh, that's good. That's really good because I just think that's important. That's a great reminder no matter what decade you're in. But I think there is a kind of that 20s and 30s when you kind of think, you know, everything's permanent, right?
Yes,
I mean, you
yes,
do, you just think everything's permanent. And then you
yes,
hit your 40s and you're like, okay, wait a minute. Maybe there is an eraser on some of this. It's not all permanent. Maybe, it's not as big of a deal as I thought it was, or
right,
whatever. And you get perspective on life changing. And then I think you hit your 50s and you're like, you know what? Um, this is good. This is so much better maybe than what I thought, in so
right.
many ways, of being able to watch the goodness of God in the land of living, as you
Yeah.
said. Yeah.
Well, and to our younger listeners, I think I was so in the moment raising my kids that I forgot to enjoy my kids.
Mm.
Like
Well,
you're
that's
you're
good.
doing the thing so much, and it's so hard because it's constant. That's a
Yeah.
hard season.
Yeah.
But I wish I had been more present. Coulda, shoulda, woulda. No,
Yeah.
looking back, I know more. I would have done different had I known different. But
Sure.
and I was there, but I would enjoy them even more.
Yeah.
And as a young mom who's standing there with her dirty diapers and the loads of laundry, that's hard to hear, but it's so true.
Yeah.
This passes so fast. You know,
Yeah.
it
It's
really
so
does.
true. No, yeah,
Like,
it's so true. It's so true. It's oh, that's good. That's good. There's so many. Kathy, you've just given us so many nuggets here. I think you've given us some great nuggets about marriage and time with your husband. I think you've given us some great nuggets, just so many things. So I'm hoping that those of you who are listening with us are like me, and you're like, oh, that's good, that's good, that's good, that's good. You may have to go back and listen to this again just to get some of that again. But that's some really phenomenal stuff. And I just think I agree with you. I think we ought to be excited about where we are because God has purpose for us
yeah,
today. And
yeah,
whatever that might look like. I know a lot of women fret about how old they are. I know women that won't even tell people how old they are because somehow it's this stigma. And I'm like, good night. No, that means if I'm breathing air, that means I'm alive. I'm excited about
absolutely,
that next
absolutely.
birthday. Absolutely. So I think this has just been so good. So one of the things we always end with are just some fun, what we call rapid fire questions. And these are just fun, get to know you questions just a little bit because women are out there and they're like, oh, she likes that too. I like that too. So let me ask you this. If you were to go eat your favorite meal, whether you cook it at home or whether you go out to eat, doesn't matter. But if somebody says, Kathy, it's your favorite meal, what's on the table?
It is absolutely a cheeseburger.
Oh, very good. Cheeseburger. All right. Very good. Very good. All right. So, are there any books that you're reading or you've read that just have really impacted you?
One of my all-time favorite books that I just have reread is Trusting God by Jerry Bridges.
That's a good
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
That's a good one.
I
That's
just picked it up again uh through this last season of waiting. I was like, okay, Lord, yeah.
yeah.
So, and I like to read. I have to make myself read.
Okay.
It's not enjoyable for me, which sounds terrible, but it's just I just have a hard time reading. And so, but I like to read anything like biblical, like biographies of great women of
Yeah.
faith, that kind of stuff. Um, I'm currently reading. We're doing as a staff. We're reading a book, and now I can't even think of the name of it.
Sorry.
But we have to read, and it's
Yeah.
fabulous because it puts some stuff in perspective.
Oh, that's good.
We are doing the study back. We're doing Experiencing God again. And let me just
Ooh,
tell you, it is good.
it is so good.
It is
Yeah.
timeless and good. It's been revised and it's been
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm actually reading another Black AB book right now,
Oh,
On
cool.
Mission with God. Just and I've read it so many times, but I'm reading it again. It's just
Yeah.
great reminders of truths. These are so good. So, what do you do for fun? You're gonna go do any. Somebody says you can do anything you want, Cathy. What would you like to go do for fun?
What would I like to do? Okay, so I love a good shoe.
Okay.
And don't need another pair. Uh,
Yes.
so I would do that. I love lunches with friends.
Mm,
I I I do. I love lunches with friends, and I don't know if you would call it a hobby because it sounds a little creepy, but I love to watch people.
yeah.
I love to watch people. It sounds so creepy, but you just can watch and learn so much about people.
Well, you need to
So
fly with me and sit in the airport stand because that is the ultimate people watcher place.
listen, I've often said I could sit in Atlanta airport for days on end and just have me a cup of coffee and yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I'm so the opposite. I'm just I'm like totally tuned out, and I know I have friends who are people watchers, and they're like, "Oh," I'm like, "What?"
My husband hates to go eat with me sometimes because I'll be all involved. I guess it's nosy, but
No,
um,
that's all right. All right. Well, hey, this is our last question for you, and it's one we ask every guest that comes on our podcast because the name of our podcast is Rooted Deep, and we just know there's things in life that keep us, Psalm 1, that keep us deeply rooted. And I love the perspective that everybody who's been on the podcast gives us as we ask them this question. So we'll ask you this question as we close out, but what keeps you rooted deep?
what keeps me rooted? Because I am in desperate need of Him, and
Mm,
so I need Him daily. I need Him for the next whatever I'm going to do, and
yeah.
so I apart from Him, I can't do anything, and so I know if I don't stick close, I'm a mess, and
Hmm.
so and I just love Him. He's been so good to me.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. So as you kind of cultivate that relationship, are there things about that relationship that you just say, man, these are my tried and true things that have kept me just close to him through the years?
yeah, I staying in the Word for sure.
Mm,
Um, I am a music person,
yep.
so I love a lot of good praise music
Yep.
throughout. Uh, and as much as I hate to read, I do read.
Sure. No,
I
absolutely. Yeah.
I love and I'm a prayer girl. I,
Hmm.
I I do. I like my time just talking with him, and I've always I'm a prayer girl. I just like to
Good.
talk to him.
Ah,
So
that's awesome. Well, this has been so good because I think there's a lot of women who dread their 50s. And I think the 50s get a bad rap sometimes.
yeah,
But it's exciting to see what God is doing in your life, and fun to be able to talk about it. As we have just we've eaten lunch together, we've traveled a little bit together, we've had really a lot of fun, and um, I'm so excited as we look forward to what the future has, because I think we can say this because this is going to be like, I think we can say this, but this is like the earliest announcement that's getting ready to happen because this has not been announced yet. But
oh yay,
Dare for More Live next year is going to
yes,
be in Chattanooga at Dallas Bay with you guys. And I am so excited for you to be a kind of a part of that. So I don't know if we can announce that or not, but I just did. So
it's
fun, fun,
happening.
fun.
So we might as
Right.
well.
Is we might as well. So yeah, so I'm pretty excited to be able. So you heard it first right here on the Rooted Deep podcast. But I'm excited about that. So Kath, thanks for joining us. Thank you for being a part. It's been
Welcome.
so much fun.
Hey, anytime. And it's cool being 50 with you. I like you.
I know, right. We got some empathy sisters, right? That we
Yeah,
can relate,
absolutely.
right?
Absolutely. Sometimes those
So
moans and groans come from within. You know exactly what you're talking
exactly,
about.
exactly. Well, listen, thanks everybody for joining us today on the podcast. I'm hoping that you're loving these conversations through the decades. We've got two more coming, one in the 60s and one in the 70s. And I know that you're going to enjoy that kind of as we just move through. But until next time, take Cathy's words to heart. Stay in prayer, stay in the word, stay grounded, and stay close to Jesus, and he will guarantee to keep you rooted deep. We'll see you again next time.